You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Well, it is a big day for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who clinched the Atlantic Division with a 4-0 win against the Buffalo Sabres, who basically are not really that good of a team, but they did play their hearts out, and we are very fortunate to be able to have Billy Jaffe join us here to help us break it all down from NESN NHL Network and host of Morning Brew with Jaffe and Razor. And of course, you can see some of the black and gold on him there. He is part of the Bruins broadcast, which, sorry there, Jaffe, you're not going to be doing any Bruins postseason right now. So we thought we would just, bring you on a Toronto podcast.
Very appropriate, yeah.
Because Toronto's in the playoffs, right? Like
coincidental. I would think that this is coincidental.
Toronto is just like, it feels like they won the cup after last night. I mean, they get the win, the 4-0 win, which really all they needed was just that 1 point to be able to clinch the Atlantic Division, the third time in the expansion era, without looking at, with game aside, matchup going forward in the playoffs aside, you just look at what does this say about this team this season?
About Boston or about Toronto? You're talking about Toronto?
Toronto.
Okay, well, I had to make sure. First, as you know, I was working the Bruins game last night, so I didn't get to watch it. So that's why I'm not going to talk it.
Right,
the game means nothing. Yeah. Right, crap. Move on.
Yeah, no. Yeah, what does this mean to Boston?
Yeah, well, it means that all of us broadcasters are searching for other work, at least in the first round.
Well, come on
down. Look, for Toronto, it's been a really good season. I feel like their game has matured, developed in some ways under Berube and with some of the new players they have there, which is a really good thing. I don't think I'm actually saying anything, Julie, that is earth-shattering here. The proof, though, is going to be in the playoff pudding. That's just what it's going to be. Can one of the goalies, most likely Stolarz, can he handle, the series? Is he the guy, right? Can he handle it as a number one? Can Wall, if he ends up being the guy, can he handle it? We'll see. Is their defense better? Has Tanev, what they brought him in for was this now. This is it. I mean, he's a great blood and guts glue guy, but now it's playoff time. Can he stay healthy? Can he handle the matchups that are going to be required? Yeah, I think so. Because Carlo's addition. It's there. We can go through the whole thing. When it's all said and done, has their game matured enough that when it changes, not if, when it changes, meaning the game, the style, in the playoffs, which we all know will, can they handle it? Not just for one game, but can they handle it over a 7-game series? That's the big question.
Right. Well, I think when you bring up Anthony Stolarz, this is a different situation than like Ilya Samsonov, when we were wondering, say, last year, is this the guy, or Joseph Woll, and everyone kind of being just like, does Toronto have a goalie? Like, they have a goalie, and they have two goalies. And Stolarz last night, I think, with getting the shutout and being nails over the last couple games
really
that
good.
He's had to start. He's won his last 8 starts or something like that. We're not a numbers podcast here. Is that it shows that at least that position is an upgrade from last year. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like they've had over, say the last few weeks, various different types of games, different matchups, but they've also had low scoring games too, like the one against Montreal when we know that Montreal's really trying to get into the playoffs. And I think that those are some of the types of games that, because they've won them, because they've been able to get shutouts, but like that tight scoring, like where you're not going to be able to get a whole lot going. Those are the games that it might be like in the playoffs. And because you've had this experience, you're going to be better off for it.
They should be. Look, they should be. Again, I like them. I do. The Atlantic is going to be tough, no matter what. I mean, Tampa, Florida, and the fact that you got Ottawa and Toronto in the first, holy smokes. I mean, they're going to be great matchups, those two matchups. And you would think, look, Anthony Stolarz should have learned an awful lot from last year in the playoffs. But that's learning by watching, which is important. I know you know that, but you got to learn also by doing now. Now it becomes, now you're going to be the guy in the net. And he doesn't have to be just him the whole time. But I just do think there's a comfort factor when you have that one guy that you know you can rely on. Let's see if he can be that guy. He's not 22. He's an older, he's a guy that's been around. He's got great presence, being physically, but also I think the guys really like him, big, and he battles his backside off for it. So I think that he's got to be good. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here. You don't want him to have to steal series, though, Julie. That's
right.
Not a good sign for your team. Be the best goalie for the type of team you have. I do think under Craig Berube, I think they respect the tight checking, lower scoring games. You have to respect that. You've got to commit to playing that way. If they are, as you said, later in the season had some of those, if they are really committed to doing that and they can stick with that, not get out of it, not cheat the game, not try. Okay, that's going to take them further. But this Atlantic and division in general, freaking beast. I mean, it's the Atlantic and the Central. Like, I see the winner of the Eastern Conference coming out of the Atlantic, but then I catch myself and I say, are they going to beat each other up so much in the first 2 rounds?
Very good point. Was just thinking that. We got the Battle of Ontario, which is Toronto and Ottawa, Battle of Florida, which is, of course, the Panthers and the Lightning, and both of those teams are incredible and have won 3 out of the last 5 Stanley Cups combined. I mean, have been in Florida is really insane. And when they haven't won it, they've been to the finals. So when you kind of look at, okay, you mentioned Stolarz being a guy that the room kind of rallies around, and he had some great quotes from the game last night. He said that it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a little bit of a war. And this is a guy that hasn't even played for the Leafs in the playoffs before. He's not even from Toronto. He's not even from like the Toronto, Ottawa sort of areas. He's from
down
the
country.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's already like understanding that is going to be the DNA. But I find it like, what do you think about a goalie saying something like that?
Doesn't bother me. I mean, it's because it's going to be that way. It's true. I think he's just stating the obvious, Julie. When what it is we all know the wonderful quality, the wonderful aspect of our sport that we all love so much is that it's got this, approved violence to it, right? I mean, and it gets amped up even more come playoff time. This is what we all they play for, we work for, everybody, fans, withstand the 82 game regular season for. So a goalie saying that I don't think he's not saying anything to rile anybody. I'll be saying the obvious. This is going to be a brutal, nasty series.
Yeah.
And it's going to be. And I think Florida-Tampa is going to be a brutal, nasty series. And my guess is he's really excited. And look, he's been in the league long enough. He understands the Battle of Ontario. I mean, he knows his geography, obviously. So he understands it. And he's played in Toronto this year. He understands what it's about. And the fact that this Ottawa team is an up-and-comer. It's their time. They finally made it. They finally did enough. And remember, there was some tenuous times first half of this year with Ottawa, but then they're showing everybody that they're, they didn't squeak in. They made it. They established themselves. That adds more fun to this battle.
It definitely does. And so let's get into that Battle of Ontario. Ottawa Senators and their fans are forced to be reckoned with. They are all in, and they are kind of like the Leafs, but they are loud, they're raucous, they make themselves known. That is definitely the fan base. I know this, my family's from Ottawa originally, and I grew up in Toronto, so I've seen, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, I think, but like I dated a guy from Carp, Ontario, which is right near Canada, which is right near where the Sens play, and that was torture. Like, I was a pretty big Leafs fan back then in university, and he was a big Sens fan. And it was, if we were married now, we would be divorced for this series, because it was just like, that was such a huge point of contention between us. So when you look at even just like before the game has even started.
Hey, you don't know with how bad the Sens were for a long time. Maybe he would have, become somebody else fan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe he would have become a Leafs fan in that. Oh, yeah. He would.
Well, I wouldn't
go
that
rather,
far.
Like, yeah. He would have rather done something else than do that. That's that's crossing enemy lines. But okay, so the Sens are good. They're back. My whole childhood and adolescence is a reminder of the Leafs dominating the Sens. It's just like that's always what it was every single year. This year, you mentioned they're new. They are inexperienced, but they're playing with house money in a way against a team that sort of has to get it done. Like Toronto's window is certainly very much closing in certain aspects, and there's a lot of pressure on them to not only just win this round, but like honestly, it feels like they got to go all the way.
They got it. They got to go. They got to get to the Eastern Final, right?
Yeah.
They have to justify what they are, so to speak, what they perceive themselves to be. How's that?
Yes, I agree. Eastern Conference Final. That is like that's the Leafs. Like, okay, check mark. We finished the season. Anything above that, which is crazy, which would be the Stanley Cup Final, is and then once you get there, then your expectations are huge. But Billy, going to this matchup, Toronto, Ottawa, what are like some of your keys that you think are really going to decide the series?
Well, you bring up the youth of Ottawa and the inexperience. So how do they handle turbulent times, right? I think that's going to be one thing. And the Leafs, in theory, Julie, they've been through all these first rounds, and they got to the second round, and they've been involved in some battles. They should have an advantage in handling the moments that don't go their way. You would think, right? Like they've gone through it enough. Claude Giroux, major history, major experience. I'm going through my head real quick, like other guys that have major experience on this Ottawa team that you would say you can rely on, you can go to. They're all going to say the right thing, I would imagine, meaning when tough times come, but they haven't really experienced it. Nick Jensen probably has some playoff experience right before he got there. I love how we're
just trying to name guys. I remember Nick Jensen when he played for the Oshawa Generals. That can't be a guy that you're...
Well, but he has played well for them when he's played, and I'm just saying he has experience. He had some Washington Capital experience. I'm literally going through my head right, and their goaltenders. Linus Ullmark,
their goaltender pretty well.
Well, I do, but he hasn't had the playoff success. Remember, it didn't go swimmingly for him in playoffs with the Bruins. So can he elevate? All right, the question marks in net for both teams, though, really, when all's said and done. But when I look at this, I look at if the Leafs get, I know Domi's been playing with the second line. If you can keep those two lines going, I think that is a real advantage for the Toronto Maple Leafs because you've got skill, you've got finish, you've got everything. I think you've got some good stuff there. And then how do the top 4D for Toronto perform? I think that, you've got the real mobile guys with Ottawa. We know about Sanderson and, you understand about Shabbat. And I think, though, can Morgan Riley, a Carlo, a Tanev, as I mentioned before, can those guys elevate? And if they can handle with home ice the matchups and stuff, again, advantage of the Leafs there.
Yes, I think when you look at the lineups, very interesting. I know there was a little bit of backlash against Domi on that second line last night, but he had done well beforehand. But if you can figure out that Bobby McMahon was so great on that second line, but then the third and fourth lines have been really good as well when he has also gone down there. Gives them an opportunity. We know what the top 4D right now, Jake McCabe and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Looks like OEL will be back for the first game.
How healthy is he? Right. That's Can he? And covered the cup last year. Did a ton of Florida. He was so good for them.
Yeah.
You want to talk about really? He was so confident last year, all year, but especially in the playoffs, he was such a difference maker that second power play actually elevated to first power play by the end of the Stanley Cup. He was an integral part of that victory.
He certainly was. And he's then, I guess, for the Leafs, great that they don't have to potentially face him if, no Florida, no Brandon Montour as well, if we're looking at Dion, Florida. So these two Atlantic Division matchups, they could beat each other up, and then whoever sort of comes out of it and whoever's playing each other, then that's going to be, I mean, a grind. Guys are going to be probably pretty gassed, but who knows? I mean, like, one of these teams could really take advantage, and we could be completely off on this. And speaking with Pierre Maguire, who is on our show on Maguire Mondays, I mean, he's been on the Leafs bandwagon since day one, since like day minus 50. And it's wild because he grew up a Habs fan. So like, it doesn't mean he's just a big Leafs homer. And, you know, he was really harping on the inexperience of the Ottawa Senators when it comes to certain moments. I think you make a good point about the fact that the Leafs have been in the most precarious of positions all the time. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it, especially against the Boston Bruins. Really just against the Boston Bruins. And you wonder if it's something that it's like they've learned from it, or if it's something where it's like, oh, it gives you just like that awkward feeling like I don't want to dip my toe in that water right there.
Well, if they haven't learned from it, shame on them. Truthfully, you know, all their Bruins moments, especially in Game 7s. But there's more than just the goals and game overtime or whatever. It's just been about how does the series end up getting there after having been up and that kind of stuff. I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting. You know, Matthews, Tavares, Marner. I mean, I'm
JT, man, he's been having a heck of a year.
He's been awesome. I got to tell you what, he's been awesome. I don't know where this ends up for JT and the Leafs. I don't know if he just, at his age, understands, okay, I've made all my money, the mega money, and I'll accept whatever to stay here. And now you pay, the Mariners of the world to keep the team together, and I'll do my role. Or if somebody else says that's, let's say, real close and needs a number two to three and says, hey, JT, we'll give you 3 years. We'll give you 3. I mean, it's the most I think team would give him. But
right.
He's had such a good
Would
year.
you go for 1 year with the Leafs, or would you go for 3 with like Nashville? And then that kind of turns into a Steven Stamkos sort of odd situation.
Well, it does. And I knew John since the day he was drafted with the New York Islanders. I was with them and saw him develop there and got to know him. And what's important to him now is if it's staying at home with the kids and meaning in TO and staying there. Well, again, I never begrudge anybody for taking the money. This is such a finite business that these guys are in, right? But if he's loving it and thinks that this team's great and he feels that and maybe he gets established as the third line center instead of the second line. You know what I mean? I mean, he's happy to stay there. But I'm fascinated to see where it ends up with him. But with that said, they've got a lot of guys that should be able to handle these playoff situations. If you said it a few minutes ago, if not now, if they don't make it at least the Eastern Final, if not now, when?
Right.
When?
And they've also been very quiet in the playoffs, right? Like their scoring, it's always been like, where's Marner? Where's Matthews? Like, how come they can't score? And that's always been against the Bruins. In what way do you think
matchups against the Bruins were always good against them defensively? Yeah. Their structure made it hard. The Bruins, for years, of course, with the big guy on the back end in Chara, made a huge difference. And then you had some other really good defensemen there too. Not the same right now, especially the injuries they had this year. But that was a tough matchup for Toronto, and I felt the Leafs were stubborn. And they either would stick with it or the players would continue to do the same thing. I mean, I know you don't want to turn them into a dump and chase team. I'm not saying that, but sometimes you got to chip and retrieve. You got to, and you got to understand that if another team has scouted you and they're matching you and they figure out, well, all right, you got to maneuver around it a little differently. So I do think experience. I agree with Pierre. I think experience, and I know it favors Toronto. But if they get into, I'll tell you what, Ottawa is so comfortable open ice. If you open the ice up, meaning if you allow them to play free flow and go and aggressive, oh boy, watch out, because they're happy playing that. it's pretty obvious, but you have to force them to play regularly in their own zone below hash marks.
Right.
And below the goal line.
Yeah, definitely. And okay, so I'm going to go into one thing about the fact that we saw the Leafs against Florida just really not be able to get a whole lot going. And that's a bad matchup for them. At least if Florida's playing Florida's way, it just was, they could not get out of their own zone. It was, I mean, they could barely get the puck, anything like that. So in that sense, when we hear teams say like, well, we don't, we're just focusing on us. We're just focusing on the way we play. But then you have a team like a Florida that plays different from Tampa or plays different from other teams. And like you would imagine you'd have to adjust to playing a certain way. So then you'd mentioned Ottawa being really good with the open ice, all that. So then how does Toronto counter that?
You force them, especially on the road, when they're on the road, to play below the goal line. You have to. You have to use the back of the net, the corners. You have to force them to have to decipher their marks, deep in their own zone. You've got to be able to. If you don't, again, they can maneuver real well. So how does Toronto do that? It's hockey 101. You don't turn pucks over in the neutral zone. You make sure that you get at least below the hash mark upon entry, or change the point of attack, that kind of stuff. You cannot let them. I force them to turn. I do. I force their D to have to turn as much as possible, and then I get after it. And we know how great of a shot a guy like Matthews has from the slot area. If you can get pucks around and you can open up the slot area, that's advantage to Toronto. It sounds like a simplification. And truthfully, Julie, there's a lot of teams that would say this. You'd say the same thing about it's just the way it is. It just is. It has to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with you watching the Bruins last year against Toronto, and you mentioned the two sort of headed goalie situation that Toronto has, which really is kind of 1A, 1B, but maybe a 1 and a 2 Stolarz and Wool. But you saw the Bruins have to deal with Swayman and Allmark. What would you say that you learned from that situation that maybe Toronto could take from their situation?
It was such a raging debate for 2 years in playoffs here about what should the Bruins do. And I was always in favor of more or less one guy. Yet I'll contradict myself and admit probably, last year, last year they stuck with one guy in the Florida series after the epic record-setting year, and until the end, and they probably should have changed earlier. They should have changed earlier. And then last year they go with the other, and they get to the second round, which was a nasty series against Florida. And Paul Maurice, by the way, said that. He said that when in the final, he's like, that Boston series was violent. It was nasty. And the Bruins gave it their all, but Florida was a better team, obviously. What do you learn? I think because both of these Toronto goalies are inexperienced in the playoffs. I think I don't think you hesitate to make a change now. If Stolarz wins, good, go with him. If you see a little something, you know what? You go to Wall. Why not? You did it. You did it during the season. Right. And if you can get 2 good games out of Wall, and then you have to go back to Stolarz, I got no problem with that. I've kind of changed where I always thought you had to have one guy, but if it makes the goalies and the team most comfortable, then just do that. Right. And I mean, it's I just think you can't be too stubborn to stay too long with one guy.
Yeah, and that is
in this situation, not Tampa with Vasilevsky and not Florida with Bobrovsky. This is very different.
Very different. And Wool knows how to come in as a backup. That's like what he was sort of known for ahead of this season, being able to be that guy. So that at least he's comfortable in that situation.
And Julie, I haven't seen, and I don't have in front of me, and I'm not great with remembering numbers either. I don't remember how many games in a row Stolarz has played.
Right.
Okay.
Because he was out with injury for quite a bit.
For quite a bit, right. But what is the most amount of games he has started in a row? And I understand that you get a little break at times during the playoffs, but it's still a lot of games every time. So don't hesitate, even if it's for a one-gamer, to give him that rest. And that's what I think I've learned from watching the Bruins. I mean, you might say, hey, they won or they lost and he was really good, but now he's on his fourth game in a row. I guess if you believe in your other guy. So we'll find out, I think, if the Leafs believe in their second guy or not, in early on in the series. It's
definitely an interesting question because say you were up 3-1 in a series and you have a chance to close it out and you're like, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to give your guy that's won most of your, all the games rest? Because then you could just, and the other guy comes in and doesn't do well. And then now your series is at 3-2 and you've now planted, a little bit of hope in the other team, a little bit of seed of doubt for you.
Maybe, or if you go into that game 3-1 and you keep your starter in there and he's really not good and you lose 5-1. Now, what do you think? What's he thinking? What's the team thinking? And is he even more tired? If it was one of the clear-cut number ones, no question, we're not having this chat. But since it's not, that's where I would say you asked me 5 minutes ago, what did I learn from it? I said, don't hesitate to make a change.
Right. And that's
if you see something or feel something.
I think that's also really great advice throughout the entire lineup too in the playoffs, because a lot of teams that sometimes maybe just stick to their guns and don't change, aren't flexible, maybe don't change lineups, aren't necessarily the ones that kind of are able to adapt in advance. Okay, they got one more game. And we talked about that and this has been the story for most of the season. They are capped out, so they've got to play everyone that they have, essentially. I mean, Camp could come back. I think maybe he is. And so in what way then does Berube, not to use the term load management, but how does he manage his lines in this final game?
I mean, full disclosure, I don't know how many minutes guys have been playing the last couple. I've focused on other teams instead of the Leafs. I would say you're talking what are Marner's, Matthews, the big guys, 20 to 22 minutes a night, right? I would say they're 14, 16. Right. You're giving your third, fourth lines 14 to 18.
How important is it to win that game?
I don't think it's important at all.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I just didn't know if it was what kind of juice it had.
No, I think that these kind of games, when it's all done, the biggest juice is to stay healthy.
Yeah,
that's the biggest. So no, I mean, if you end up having an opportunity to win the game, yeah, you do your thing. You but you're not forced to put out your big guns.
Right.
Give your third, fourth line guys the opportunity to power play it up. And there's no juice in winning that game at all. None. It doesn't do anything for you heading into the playoffs whatsoever.
Right. Well, yeah, we were just talking about time on ice. I was just checking it out. I mean, Matthew Nyes clocked 19 minutes, 23 seconds. So Matthews, Marner, and Nyes were all over 19 minutes. So is Carlo. So is Benoit. And then Riley and Tanev are both over 20. So, yeah, you'd imagine those guys would all be lower.
They all have to dress because of their situation, then you just don't play them much. And look, they're playing Detroit, right? They're playing Detroit in their last game. There's nothing to gain by either team. I mean, Detroit, may have some young guys that want to make sure that they show management and coaching that they're still in it to win it, but it should be a no-hitter. And yes. If it is a hitter, and it's a shame because, while we do have some great first-round matchups, if you look at Colorado, Dallas, et cetera, but we've now known these matchups more or less for a while who's basically in. I know there was a little potential for Calgary to make it in, but you know what I mean. It was likely that Minnie was and St. Louis was. But these games really down the stretch, we've had I don't know if it's more than normal or not. It just feels like it this last week where we've had a complete gaggle of games that have meant really nothing.
Yeah, it's been weird because it felt like when everything was so tight that it was going to be like come down to the last moment of like the last game. Remember last year when it was like, you know, a bunch of different teams are playing at the same time, and then you're trying to see who scored what and what period and what time and all this kind of stuff. And I guess that's also because in the Eastern Conference, like the Rangers and the Islanders and Columbus has made strides.
Still there.
And the Habs are really trying to lock that one up too. So that's that one interesting thing going on. But yeah, it differed from what we thought. Okay, so to wrap things up, we got some playoffs coming up. We know, Billy, I know this is tough for you because you are on a Bruins broadcast and the Bruins aren't in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
T's and P's, thoughts and prayers to all of you guys over the Bruins organization. That comes from all of Leafs Nation. And
it's been a pretty good run. It's been pretty good run. Now the key is to get back at it.
The standards are pretty high over there. So it's like you trip once, everyone's like, oh my gosh. Okay. But beyond that, what do you think is the Leafs? Okay. Their biggest pro to like going far in the playoffs, and then like their biggest con.
Oh, con might be the pressure of being the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done. That, and I'm going to go back to goaltending. I'm just going to, you have inexperienced number one playoff goaltenders. You can't avoid that. Does one of them shine? Does one of them step up? Do both of them? Great. If they do, it's not a con, but that's definitely a big question mark. And a con might just be being the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's the ultimate pressure of, people say the pressure of playing for the Yankees. True, but they've won so much that they kind of, they're expected to. It's still tough, and you're dealing with a lot of, stuff there all the time, media, et-cetera. But they win more or less regularly. So it's different. Toronto needs to win. That's it. So they're being their biggest pro. They're right up there with the Marners, the Matthews, Tavares, the Nylanders. These guys, if these guys perform, you can't deny that they have as much high-end skill or right up there with the best teams in the league. But you brought it up 10 minutes ago or so about how, if they get into a matchup situation, that's the beauty. The beauty of the playoffs is that you get 7 games to figure out your opponent. The beast of the playoffs is that, if you don't figure it out, either A, you get exploited, or B, you get disappointed because you don't, like you said, you don't adjust. So what happens? Now, I think another pro that they have is their coach. They do. I think Craig Berube, having been through a lot of experience, we know about 2019. I think that's a big pro for them. I do think he can bring a lot of expertise and a lot of calming influence and fire to that team as well. So, listen, I do think, I think they win the first round. It's gonna be tough. Every first round, usually there's like one round that you're like, 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
Okay. But usually the other series are all 6, 7, whatever. So it's going to be, it should be great. It should be great fun. It's great for not just Ontario too. It's great for Canada to have that kind of matchup.
Right. And it's great for hockey. We love seeing a good matchup, especially when people are talking about it being a bloodbath. We saw how great that was for Four Nations when there's just so much juice on the line.
And it's great for you if Toronto went. Would you text your ex-boyfriend from 20 years ago?
I was going to message him anyway because he works in tech kind of TV stuff about a camera that I wanted to use. Hey, I just need some help for my Leafs podcast. Would you mind helping me out there? Of course, I'm going to text him. There'll be some fighting words. Those Ottawa Senators fans are ruthless. I was just there for World Juniors, and there's a lot of Sens fans there, and they're all like, that's their thing too, right? Like the Leafs. Okay, so I wanted to mention and the blue and white disease that Brian Burke appropriately named when he was general manager there was just like the pressure of playing in Toronto. Really just a lot of guys, and some guys just couldn't deal with it. It's just, it's relentless. Even covering them in 2022 against Tampa when I was a sideline reporter, I remember, okay, this is a good little aside. We were at practice in Tampa after the Leafs had won game 3. Mm-hmm. So they're up 2-1 in the series. And there's all the Leafs media, kind of in Tampa, they have those two, it's practice rinks, or they have the practice rink. It's a little below where media would be. And I remember my friend saying, go over and say hi to Kyle Dubas at the time and Brendan Shanahan, because they were friends. It was had already been talked about. I just go say hi. I wasn't going to try to be so give me some scoops or whatever, but just introduce myself. And I remember as I was walking, I had 500 Leafs media watching me. People told me, they're I've been here for 4 years and I haven't said hi to either one of them once. I haven't even had a chance. I'm well, you just got to go up and do it. I'm but they're all watching me. And then one person on the Leafs coaching staff put a rail, like a barrier in front of me. It was so embarrassing because I was I felt like cattle. I was but my friends, I was told to go say hi. And then all the Leafs media were just watching me. And I was okay. All right, I'm media here, and now I'm already feeling this stress of the Leafs media. So the fact that the players feel this, but Brian Burke then said during that series, they have dealt with the blue and white disease and they know how to overcome it. They should know how to overcome it at this point. So he had a bit of a positive spin on it. But there is that fact that still exists. And, I'm pointing at my head right now. If it's not going on up there, it ain't going to be going on the ice. I truly believe.
Yeah. Well, you see some of their players had performed earlier this year, Four Nations, in big moments. Marner comes to mind. And Matthews was pretty good too. I know he was on the ice. You could argue the last goal wasn't his issue. It was really maybe the defenseman who went the wrong route. Regardless, they can perform. They can do well. And if they got to lead by example, they absolutely have to. And if they do that, good stuff could happen. I just think the experience factor for them, I'll say it one more time, if it doesn't play in their favor in this first round against a very, very inexperienced team, if they allow the youngsters to run wild, right? If you allow your little kids to run wild, what happens at the end of the day? You are exhausted all the time, right?
I don't think they will. I think they're going to go out.
I'm just saying, if they do, then they're screwed. If they don't, if they play with experience and play with structure, they're going to be good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to see. And this has been such a pleasure to have Billy Jaffe on here. We know that he has been locked in on the Bruins, as we said. And what this shows a lot of maturity in your game, Billy, to be coming on here and talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs. So we really appreciate that. And you guys can catch him, obviously, NESN NHL Network and host of Morning Brew with Jaffe and Razor. And make sure, guys, you follow us with Toronto Sports Rush for the rest of the season, which is one game, and then into the playoffs, baby. Yep, we are talking playoffs here. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.